I've been wanting to have this conversation about Spotify for a long time because it seemed after years of people complaining about this company, it hit a fever pitch in maybe the last 6 months of last year in 2025. People I know, people I trust, people who are music heads were beginning to leave Spotify. And it didn't seem just like a trickle in my world. I now know many folks who are on the Apple Music train. I know you've been seeing this too. So, first, big question for you. What is going on with Spotify and are they in trouble?
So, what's going on with Spotify is for basically almost as long as Spotify has existed, I think someone out there has probably had beef with Spotify. But in recent years, I mean, Spotify helped the industry come back from piracy, right? So, when Spotify came about, people were not paying for music. Spotify came in and said, what if we let you pay whatever the price was at that time and you get the world's music as part of that subscription? Which, hey, people are paying for music. Awesome. But also, now we're at a point where, yes, pretty much everyone is paying for music, especially in markets like the US, for example. But now it's becoming this question of, well, okay, I'm paying $12 a month for the world's music. Maybe I used to pay $12 for one CD back in the day. So there's this frustration among the music industry and artists of, well, yeah, people are paying, but we're not getting paid in the way we used to. We don't love that. And then there's been some other stuff that's a little wonkier and more speaks to the business model for podcast or for speaks to the business model for Spotify that has led to some more suspicion, I would say, on the artist side. Yeah, so we can dive in. Well, the big thing that happened in the past couple years is that Spotify introduced audiobooks to the service. And when
Which
it
I
did,
still don't understand. I'm sorry. It's not what I come to Spotify for. They've tried to force it on me for years. Listen, Sweden, I'm not doing it. I read books, I don't listen to them. Go ahead. Sorry.
we can talk about it. Um, so when they did that, sometime after doing that, they were able to start classifying their service as a bundle, quote unquote. Now, what does that mean? It means they can pay significantly less in royalties to songwriters and music publishers. So there was a lawsuit about this. It's still ongoing. It was refiled. Without getting too deep into the lawsuit, the judge did rule in favor of Spotify, but again, it's back in the courts now as an appeal, a refile, actually. Um, the first year that that was in action, the National Music Publishers Association said that it cost songwriters and publishers over $200 million in royalties.
Really? And this is already after artists have said that Spotify was paying them less than a penny per stream.
Yes, which we can also
Wow.
there's a lot to parse here.
Okay.
So that was like one thing that just
Yeah.
immediately people were like, what the
Mhm.
heck? Like they
And they
took
began to leave,
major.
like, artists began to leave for places like Bandcamp, or they
Yes.
just would put out music on their own websites. I've seen a bunch of artists
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah, and I think the complaints just sort of pile up. There was a book that came out from Liz Pelly where she really
Guest of this show.
publicized. Yeah, yeah. So your
Yeah.
audience knows. Publicized that they have this thing called the perfect fit content, which was favorably licensed, essentially background noise type music or white noise that could be played without having to result in a full royalty bearing event. And so you have people being like, wait a second, now you're undercutting quote unquote real artists who make that full royalty in order to do
Yeah.
cheaper content. You have
Yeah.
that, you have the
They basically were
bundle.
licensing studio artists to make a bunch of tracks all at once, take a day rate, and then sign away their rights to royalties. And
Exactly.
that began to clog the playlist. And on top of that, Spotify has been accused of letting AI music run rampant on its platform too, right?
Yes, Spotify does not ban AI content outright. It will only
Wow.
step in if it believes that there is fraud or someone impersonates an artist without their permission.
All
And
AI is
then
impersonation. Go ahead. Sorry.
oh my God, I love it. Then, so that's like wonky kind of music market type things. But
Mhm.
then there's like
Mhm.
just the vibes and decisions that Spotify has made culturally.
Yeah.
So there
Yeah.
was this dust up with Neil Young over Joe Rogan and vaccine misinformation that was being shared on his program. Neil Young and other artists left the service over that. For what it's worth, Neil Young is back. But
Yes.
Spotify
And this
essentially
happened when Joe Rogan's podcast was exclusive to Spotify. People
exactly.
wanted Spotify to take off this offensive content that was anti-vax. They said, "No, we're neutral." Then artists like Neil Young left. And their share price
Exactly.
went down for a bit too, right?
Yes, the share price did go down. It could be because of that. I also think part of it was this was around the time that Spotify spent over $1 billion to get into podcasting, and
Ugh.
investors did not like that they didn't see returns from that very quickly. And so that's when investors started punishing the stock, and that is when Spotify pulled back on quite a lot of its podcast investments. Um,
Mm.
and then in more recent years/months, there's been some discussion around things like Daniel Ek, the co-founder of Spotify, was the CEO up until very recently, now is just executive chairman. His venture capitalist firm invested in something called Helsing. It's a European defense tech company that makes AI-powered war drones, and musicians did not like that either.
Yeah. Well, and for a few months last year, Spotify ran ads for ICE.
Yes, that also happened too.
So there are a lot of whammies piling up for Spotify. And, given all that, looking at the company and its strength, especially as it changes leadership, is Spotify okay? Be honest.
Well, so here's the thing. Spotify is, I would say, the most powerful company in music. It is
Mm,
essential to musicians and how they make their money and how they
mm-hmm.
live in this world.
Yeah.
The company continues to add tons of subscribers and users every single quarter. So this
Mm,
boycott Spotify movement hasn't had a huge uptake around the world, I would say.
mm.
It has not affected their recruitment as far as consumers go. And from an artist perspective, it's been more indie artists who have fan bases, but it's not like Taylor Swift is leaving Spotify. So the boycott Spotify part of this isn't really what I would say is the threat to Spotify's business. What is the bigger
Mm.
question for Spotify is Gen Z. They love video, for example. Spotify needs to be able to do video, and they are, but like, is it really working? It's like, does Gen Z
I
think
turn it
Spotify
off
is
when I
cool?
see it. If I open Spotify and the podcast I want to play starts doing video, I turn it off because I
Yeah.
didn't come there for that.
Yeah. So, like, that's a big question. And then Gen Z, when they're off their family plans or even Gen Alpha, do they continue to subscribe? AI, are we going to be using Suno or Udio as examples where maybe we're just remixing songs that we like a Sabrina Carpenter song, to our liking, and we don't need the actual official version from Spotify? Like maybe we're just playing around with it in Suno and Udio. And does
Wow.
Spotify get those capabilities or not? So these are kind of the bigger questions that I would say are fundamentally challenges for them. And at the end of the day, Spotify still pays over 60% of its revenue to music rights holders. So they are fundamentally burdened in that way. And they have to figure out for investors how to get outside of that and actually keep more of their money, which is why you see things like this bundle happening.
Can I be honest and say I think the algorithm sucks now? I think it's a lot worse than it was 5 years ago. I'm constantly bombarded by artists I've never heard of with songs I don't like being pushed to me. And certain playlists that I went to for an amazing discovery years ago are now bad. I used to love, during the depths of COVID lockdown, their modern psychedelia playlists. It kept me company as I road tripped across the country. And it was just ideal, sublime, chill road trip vibe out music. That playlist sucks now. And when I open my homepage for Spotify, it's trying to give me artists that I would never ever seek out. I have talked with people like Liz Pelly about how the algorithm has changed. The biggest change might be, and people don't know this a lot, um, if you're a musician who wants to get extra love on Spotify and have your music pushed to more homepages and more accounts, if you agree to a lower royalty rate, Spotify will push you. So they've been
Mm.
quietly doing something tantamount to payola in their algorithm for a few years now, huh? It's
Yes,
making it
this is called
bad.
discovery mode. And I
That's a
actually wrote
nice way to
about
put
this
it.
recently where
Yeah.
when discovery mode was unveiled, everyone in music, it was likened to payola. People were like, this is not okay. And in the years since then, it has become standard in the music business. Everyone
Really? So
is
everyone
using
does
it.
it. Is
Everyone's
that why
using
I
it.
heard Sabrina Carpenter's Espresso for a good year and a
This
half
is a
on
great
Spotify
question.
nonstop?
Wish I could tell you. They don't tell you. This is the other. They don't tell you which tracks are opted in. So as a consumer, you have
Really?
no insight into why am I seeing this. And so they are trying to respond to this, I will say. So in this big story I published this week, I interviewed the new co-CEOs, Alex Nordstrom and Gustav Soderstrom, about what they're up to. And their
Mhm.
solution for this is basically AI and giving people more control over the algorithm. So they launched something called the prompt playlist that
Prompted
lets
playlist.
prompted playlist, thank you. That lets you essentially type in what you want from the playlist and it will spit it out. And you can be really specific, like,
So, like, an AI playlist, basically.
yeah, and you can be like, I want you to make a playlist of all the tracks that were rated 9.0 and above by Pitchfork this year, and I want it to be all artists I've never heard before, or all songs from artists I already like that I haven't heard before. Things like that, where you can get really specific trying to curate it.
Huh. Which seems like it could be good, but also, I don't want it to think that hard. I want Spotify thinking that hard about what I want and knowing what I want.
I have a feeling that there will, at least from the impression I got talking to them, it's like they sort of want people to be prompt influencers, where it's like you come up with a really fun prompt that becomes a meme or
Oh.
something and everyone uses it, type of thing.
Huh. Interesting. So, does this new leadership seem hopeful about how Spotify can survive all of this? Surviving AI, surviving the rise of TikTok, surviving just all kinds of other streaming platforms and endless scroll video taking people's attention? Are they confident that Spotify can make it through this?
The way they are confident is that their philosophy is basically, well, everyone zigs, they're going to zag. So instead
Mm.
of leaning into doom scrolling, they're going to lean into this mantra they have called no regrets, which is,
Wow.
yeah, people love the no regrets, which is that you should not feel bad about the time you spend on Spotify. So at the end of a Spotify
Mm,
session, you are like, you know what? That wasn't a waste of my time. I feel better
mm,
because I listened to some good music, or I listened to a podcast and
mm.
learned a lot, or I consumed a really amazing audiobook, or, and this was in my story, a little scoop here, they're getting into fitness content, so guided workouts.
Are
So you
you
could see.
serious? Okay, tell me more. Tell me more.
Well, so what happened was, and you would know this as a podcaster, they've really gone directly for video podcasts.
Mhm,
And as a result of them launching a new partner program that basically pays people based on the amount of consumption that happens of their programs, instead of it just being
mhm.
video podcasters, YouTubers have gotten into the mix. And part of the YouTubers that have gotten into the mix are these workout instructors who upload their guided workouts. And Spotify is seeing that people are really watching Spotify and doing these workouts. So now they're leaning into that data discovery and building around it.
Hearing the way you describe Spotify trying to expand what they do to keep people's attention, it feels a lot like the mission creep of a company like Amazon. Amazon started just to mail you books, and now they do everything. I saw a commercial the other day. You can buy a car on Amazon now. It's kinda
I
wild.
saw that. Crazy.
Right? It's crazy. What is it with all these companies, and Facebook and Meta are trying it too. They all want to become the everything app, the thing you go to for everything. Why do they keep trying this? Why can't they have a lane? It is exhausting me because now increasingly you get to a point where you can't tell one app from the other because they're all doing the same thing, which is everything.
Well, fundamentally for Spotify, their lane was music. There's other music streaming apps, to your point, Apple Music, that people are using. So that's not going to give them the competitive edge. So then it's like podcasts. Well, there's other
Everybody has a
podcasts. Right. It's
podcast.
an open source medium.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
okay, that's not going to necessarily be the thing. And exclusives didn't
Hmm.
work. So then you're like,
Hmm.
video. Well, hey, YouTube is actually now the #1 podcast consumption platform, according to Edison
Hmm.
Research. So now
Hmm.
Spotify needs video to ensure you keep coming back. And I think they're just continuing to look for ways to up how much time people spend on the app and how often they come back. So in my story, I had a stat that it was people come to Spotify 25 out of 30 days in a month. And that was up
Not
from a few
bad.
years ago. Yeah. And they want to be 30 out of 30. They want you to feel like you have to come to Spotify every day. And this comes in the context, too, of investors want them to raise prices basically forever. And the music industry also wants them to keep raising prices. So if they're going to keep raising prices, they have to justify to the end user why they're raising those prices. And so
Mm.
they have to keep adding stuff.
Ugh. Ugh. What is one to do if they are on the cusp of leaving Spotify for ethical reasons? I've been quietly trying to wean myself off of the company for those concerns around ice ads and other things you mentioned, but also because I think the algorithm and discovery function is now just bad. It's very hard to do, and I don't know if I'll finish the process and fully cut ties. But for someone who is mulling over what to do with Spotify right now, what should they keep in mind and what are the good alternatives?
You might know more than me on this since you have actually tried to go through the process. But the place that I think where Spotify needs to now be extra aware and where I think users will start to actually switch is so Spotify announced that it's raising prices in the US. It's going to be $13 for a single subscription. That is like $1 away from YouTube Premium. And
Oh.
I now am starting to be like, okay, YouTube
Mhm.
Premium, you get ad-free videos, you also get YouTube Music, and you can lock your phone. And YouTube has DJ
You
sets.
can lock your phone
YouTube
and keep listening to music on
right,
YouTube.
exactly. When you
Oh.
when you
So it's
pay.
basically Spotify.
And so that's the thing that I think and their algorithm obviously is known as being like the best algorithm ever.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe other than TikTok. But that is where I'm wondering what's going to end up happening as they start to raise prices, because when you're starting to get very close to the price of some of these other services, then people might have to start making some harder decisions.
Yeah. Do you think that Spotify would have expected to have a reporter who covers their business say that their biggest competitor is a platform like YouTube? Do you think they would have expected that 5 years ago?
Well, 5 years ago, they were poaching Joe Rogan, who was a YouTube podcaster. So
Ah,
maybe they
okay.
were maybe they
Maybe they
were
saw it coming.
yeah, they might have. I mean,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I think gosh, I wish I remembered the year that wasn't it the famous Netflix quote about we're competing with sleep? I mean, I think this
Wow.
idea of we are competing for attention, we need your attention as much as possible, has been in the DNA of many tech companies for a long time. And so I'm sure Spotify has had on their radar, well, who else is competing with us for attention?
Mm, mm. Yeah. It is very interesting when you look oh, our producer Bennett is telling us that that year was 2017. 9
For
years
the
ago.
sleep
Time
quote,
flies. For the sleep quote, I think, Bennett? I think so, yeah. Um, it is very interesting looking at coverage of Spotify because most of it at this point is critical. Even the nice pieces are kinda critical of who they are and what they're doing. But when you talked to Spotify executives about all that bad rap they're getting, their take was almost the polar opposite. They actually have a bit in your piece where they tell you that our global music listening culture was in part created by them. They said, "Hey, look, K-pop is big all over the world. Bad Bunny is singing in Spanish. He's the biggest artist all over the world. This global listening that you see, where people are connected by these global artists from all over the world, that's us. Should they be getting more credit in any way for the music culture that they say they've helped create?"
it's tough to say it's all Spotify because the internet also does a lot of work.
Mhm. Mhm.
But I think a better example, actually, just because it's in the name, is regional Mexican music, which
Mm.
literally is called regional Mexican
Yeah.
music. If you
Which I know because of Spotify.
and Peso Pluma a few
Love
years ago
him.
had this huge moment. And again, it's regional Mexican music. You expect to go down to Mexico and hear this. Do you necessarily expect to hear it around the world? And that's a
Yeah.
good example where maybe it's Spotify, maybe it's also Apple Music, maybe it's also YouTube, but there is this opportunity now for artists who were once really siloed to their countries or wherever they're from to actually
Mhm.
expand globally and perform at even arenas around the world.
Yeah. Yeah, so they did do that. But I guess the larger question here, and it's been a question forever and forever and forever, is, who is really in charge of the music industry? Is it the labels? Is it the streamers? Is it the artist? Is it the consumers? The artists increasingly are telling everyone we're not making enough money, even though we're doing events and vinyl and merch and streaming and concerts. It's still not enough. The artists are the consumers are complaining. The record labels are complaining. When it comes to music, the only folks it seems who consistently keep making more money on music or whatever else every year is Spotify. Are they officially now basically in charge of global music as we know it, and whether Spotify, whether the industry?
Huge question. I mean, they are the biggest streaming service in the world.
And they're
So,
bigger than the labels at this point.
yeah, and from a just number of people who are using that streaming service, not counting free YouTube. Okay, we're putting that aside a little bit
Yes.
here.
Yes.
But
Yes.
Spotify is the most important music streaming service that exists. And by that measure, they do have a lot of power. That said, Spotify would push back and they would say, we're paying more than ever to our music. Oh my gosh. Spotify would push back and say they're paying more than ever to rights holders in music. They put up a transparency report around this. They would definitely point to it and say, we're paying over 60% of our revenue to the music rights holders. Like, we're not keeping the majority of our revenue. So
Mhm.
they, I don't know if they would say this part, but some of the impression I've gotten is that some people think that there's just a general frustration with the reality of the world, which is, again, this one price for all of the world's music. And it's a frustration with streaming in the current model. And that Spotify, given that it's the largest streaming service in music, is sort of the stand-in for those frustrations when it actually is kind of a frustration with the system.
Hmm, I get that. Last question for you. You probably know the world of Spotify more than most people. If you were advising them, what'd be the first piece of must-heed advice you'd give them?
My god, I'm trying to think. Well, I think they're partially doing it based on
Mm,
some of the posts I've seen. They're
mm.
refocusing on music, and I think
Thank
that
God.
is really important because,
Okay.
to your point, there's a lot of frustration in the music industry towards them, but also they've kind of gone on these side quests with other verticals of content, which are fun and great too. But you gotta show some love to that music industry too and really
Mhm.
fundamentally build around the music business because that is why people came to Spotify in the first place.
Yeah. Well, and imagine you're an artist getting less than a penny per stream for your music on Spotify, and then you see them sign this, what, $80 million deal with Joe Rogan or however the hell much it
I
was.
think it was reported 200,000,000.
My God. It's kind of crazy, you know? Yeah, I agree with you. Spotify, do music. Fix your modern psychedelia playlist. Keep the audiobooks out of my life. And I might stay with you forever because I'm too old to get YouTube. I'm too old for that. Ashley, it's always a pleasure to talk with you. Thanks for your reporting. Keep the hits coming.
Appreciate you, Sam.